We have confirmation. Final Fantasy VII-R has completely flopped at 3.5 million units sold. Now, keep in mind that this is a PlayStation game and it's not going to sell much more than that. 3.5 million units sold for one of the biggest PlayStation IPs of all time. One of the games that people always hype when shitting on Nintendo, right? Like one of the biggest names in gaming, Final Fantasy VII. You know, one of the most talked about remakes in 20 years, 3.5 million units sold. Trailing behind, may I remind you, Link's Awakening on Switch. A remake, a real remake of a Game Boy game. Square Enix, there is no way this is not a failure. I would not believe. I was already skeptical of Square Enix seriously trying to pretend that Final Fantasy 15 was not a failure, but if they seriously, after declaring things like Tomb Raider 2013 a failure, if they seriously try and push this narrative that this game was successful, I'm hearing all kinds of conspiracy theories, like, oh, it's the coronavirus. People aren't going out and buying video games during a literal pandemic. Animal Crossing New Horizons sold like 11 million copies in 12 days. Like, it's probably more than that by now. Like, 13 million? Who knows, right? Who knows how much Animal Crossing is sold? But like I said, Animal Crossing has outsold Doom Eternal, Half-Life Alyx, and Final Fantasy VII-R combined. Animal Crossing is the GOAT of the year so far, like kicking off the decade strong with Animal Crossing. Wow, who would have thought that a GameCube game would have gone on to outperform a PlayStation-centric franchise? Isn't the PlayStation supposed to be so much better for game companies, so much more popular than Nintendo? Wow, it's funny how Nintendo games are doing so well in spite of all these bizarre stigmas against them. It's just really bizarre. A lot of people have we're now at the point, I think, the game has been out for like, a month? We're at the point now where people have made their YouTube videos, they've made their comments, the hype is over, this is it. Like, this is Final Fantasy VII-R. It's already in the forgotten phase, or in the process of being forgotten. I'm sure there are a couple of like hardcore fanboys still defending it. Maximilian Dude was still uploading videos about it just a couple of days ago, I think. I'm personally expecting fans to be much more critical by the time a Remake 2 comes around. By that point, it should be obvious that, like, one, this isn't a remake, and two, the original wasn't that great to begin with. It's going to be a lot like Final Fantasy 13 too, actually. A lot of people jumped off the boat with that one because they didn't like Final Fantasy 13, right? Shocker, if you make a bad game and you make a sequel to that bad game, people aren't going to buy it. Why do you think people didn't buy Devil May Cry 3? Because Devil May Cry 2 sucked balls. You completely shafted the audience, right? It's just... By the way, anyone saying that Devil May Cry has ruined action games for them, they need to play Devil May Cry 2. You can't call Devil May Cry the greatest action game series of all time when Devil May Cry 2 exists. It's just, all right. That's a topic for another video. But man, it's very it's interesting. Pretty much all of my predictions I made in 2015, the failure of The Last Guardian, Final Fantasy VII-R, Death Stranding, PlayStation as a whole, it all seems to be coming true. I'm really wondering if we're going to go all the way with my more recent predictions, because with this upcoming PlayStation 5 being the final PlayStation console, I'm not sure yet. It's really, I'm not as confident in that as I am in these predictions of, like, Final Fantasy VII-R being bad, with Shenmue 3 being bad, with it just there's so much, right? There's so much to keep in mind, right? it's going to take a lot to take out this video game console. You know what I mean? Like it really needs to reach the point where like no one is buying PlayStations anymore. Like where PlayStation just gives up, right? Um, and I'm not sure how it's going to happen. My estimation is that it's going to happen when they're comfortable streaming video games through the internet and don't need a console anymore. That's my belief. They're probably going to like have some sort of streaming service, make it available on Switch, competing with the Xbox version, which is going to do the same thing. Basically, doing what Xbox Game Pass is doing. I don't know, man. Like, I don't think they'll be able to compete. Like, I think Xbox has completely has the drop on them in that regard. Once the PlayStation name goes, like, once they get away from the console space, like, I don't see them staying relevant. Like, without their image and brand recognition, like they don't have any real attraction to normies, right? Like people can meme all they want about Naughty Dog and Jack and Daxter being great, but nobody really cares. Like the same way they care about Nintendo or even some Xbox franchises, Halo, I suppose. I don't see the same sort of legit enthusiasm from the PlayStation side of things. It's just appealing to casual gamers or people who don't play a lot of video games, which I think explains the lack of decline of popularity in Final Fantasy VII. Like now that it's not the hot new thing that you have to have, people don't care about it. It's kind of interesting looking back on history. Zelda fans always wanted more Zelda, right? And plenty of people, bought Majora's Mask, bought Wind Waker, kept hyping each and every Zelda game. It had a very dedicated core fan base, right? Final Fantasy VII, an extremely highly returned game on the PlayStation. A bunch of people who bought into the hype returned the game because they didn't enjoy it, because they didn't understand it, because it was mismarketed to them. But Sony got what they wanted. They got people to buy the PlayStation for this one game that they ended up not enjoying. It's that's Final Fantasy VII's legacy. It's interesting it ends where it began on PlayStation. That's another thing too. This remake, this reboot failing is going to do more than just decline this, just be a bomb in and of itself. Like, it's going to hurt Square Enix in the long run. Like, they killed their golden goose. They can't release a real remake after this shit. It's hurting Sony and their legacy, their carefully constructed legacy they've built up over the years about how they saved video games from big bad Nintendo, how violent video games would never be censored again. It just that lie, right? That conspiracy, and now we're reaching the point where it feels like PlayStation is running out of reasons to exist, and I expect in the near future people will begin to notice that.